Okay, that's connected. Let me do the usual comment in the chat so everyone knows to say hi.
Yeah, I'll just drop a wee share as well.
We'll give everyone a couple of moments before we get started. But I'm definitely excited to getting going again with this. It's been too long since we've done a good live stream. Oh, we've lost Angela momentarily, but I'm sure we'll get her back on as soon as she comes back into the system. Hi, Claire. It's good to see you. You've got a couple of people watching, so do say hi as you join, and we'll give everyone a moment to get the notification on their phones. Jay and Angela just dealing with some technical issues in the background, but we'll get it all up and running again. There we go. I think that's Angela back now.
Oh,
hello.
Just throw me in.
That's all right. That's all right, Angela. We've got it fixed. Claire's joined us in the meantime as well.
Hello, Claire.
Just to let you know that I can't see the chat. So if anybody particular chats to myself, I'm not being rude. I'm not swiping back and forward to see the chat.
Absolutely. I'll be keeping an eye on the comments as we go along, but yeah, we won't be answering every single one as we go. We got someone from Malaysia, so we're starting to spread the word truly.
Oh, excellent.
Fantastic.
But there we go. There we go. We'll get the word out there eventually, guys. We're doing some great work here.
Yeah, we're reaching all across the world with the 70/30 campaign now.
We had a lady from Malaysia on before. I wonder if it's the same lady. Well, I know Malaysia's a big place, but it could be
who knows?
It could be an active follower, yeah.
Got Sheila joining us as well. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Mom.
Getting there as we go. Right, well, it's been a couple of minutes, so I might start with kind of a long intro as people join us, just so we can get things started. So it's been a little while since we've been doing a live stream on the 70/30 page, so I'm glad to be back. We're continuing on a great series with kind of collaboration between the 70/30 campaign and Hearts of Ace, as we're kind of looking at adverse childhood experiences one at a time to really understand them a little bit better, but also start to get a picture of how they all fit together and how they interact and why they particularly have a cumulative effect. And I'll get into all of those details in just a little bit. I think Michelle's joined us as well in the meantime, so good to see people joining as they come in. Will's here too, so that's brilliant.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, William.
I'm gonna get a little bit of information up on the screen here around what we're going to be talking about, because it's important to acknowledge just straight from the start. So we are going to be talking about traumatic experiences today, people's lived experience of trauma, and particularly adverse childhood experiences. For people who've been through this themselves, but also people who, might have come into close contact with people they care about, etc., who've experienced this can sometimes be triggering. And by trigger, we mean that someone's sent back physically to re-experience that really stressful moment again. It's a real physiological response. So if that does happen to you, there's a few things that you can do. The first is to just ground yourself in the moment, come back to where you are, notice your surroundings, take a few deep breaths in and out. That's usually enough, but if it isn't, you can take a step back, maybe stretch your legs a little bit, get a glass of water, just remove yourself from the situation a moment until you've calmed down again. And if that still isn't enough, that is not at all your fault. We know how trauma works. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can reach out to Hearts of Ace, which is a wonderful peer support group of people with lived experience themselves. I've actually got my email address up there and Thula's, but I can pop up at the bottom there the Hearts of Ace email address there as well. So heartsoface@wavetrust.org. But if you need more urgent support, kind of immediate help, you can also go to this great association, National Association for People Abused in Childhood. They've got a great support line. They've got a great website. You can get in touch there and get a bit more urgent support if you need it. But hopefully that won't be an issue, as we know that it can actually really be quite rare when we're just having discussions like this. I'm seeing some comments coming in as well. Wonderful. Will sharing far and wide. So glad to see that we're spreading that. So I know that a lot of you watching today probably know what adverse childhood experiences are. Oh, we've lost Jay in the meantime. We're going to be fighting with technical issues today, Angela. I can feel it. I'll go over what ACEs are whilst he tries to get connected again, and then we'll see if we need to do some troubleshooting. There we go. Straight back in. Lost you there for a second, Jay, but weren't gone long.
Apologies. I don't know what happened there. I accidentally clicked it. I've got a new switching from iPhone to Samsung. Still getting used to it.
We were hoping you'd disappear, so we were just going to have a women's conversation.
We'll have to do an all-girls one for International Women's Day, Angela. It's a new thought there.
Definitely, Elizabeth.
Wonderful. And Jay, just as you were missing there, I was about to quickly go over what adverse childhood experiences are for those of the, that haven't come across it yet. So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. Hopefully everyone can see this all right. This is one of the 70/30 campaign's infographics, but basically in the late 90s, a study was done looking at negative experiences in childhood and how they connected to later life outcomes, both around physical health, mental health, but also behavior, things like ability to keep down a job, criminal activity, etc. And in particular, they focused on 10 different adverse childhood experiences. These were 3 different types of abuse, so emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse, 2 different types of neglect, emotional neglect and physical neglect, and 5 different types of household challenges. So having a parent in prison, witnessing domestic violence in the home, witnessing substance abuse in the home, having mental illness in the home, but also what we're going to focus on today, experiencing parental separation and divorce. And basically what they found was that the more adverse childhood experiences a person had, the higher risk they had for all of the negative life outcomes they studied. So across all of physical health and mental health, really higher rates of depression, higher rates of attempted suicide, higher rates of lung disease, liver disease, higher rates of cancer, also more riskier behavior. So higher rates of criminal activity, higher rates of drug use, of smoking, and really everything that they looked at, they found this kind of cumulative effect. So whilst we will be focusing on parental separation and divorce today, I really want to make it clear that the science doesn't tell us that it's one adverse childhood experience that dooms you. It tells you that when the adversity can be cumulative and it needs to be counterbalanced by a lot of positive experiences and by a lot of positive relationships to be able to allow people to build resilience for it all. So I just wanted to go over that first. Jay, Angela, is there anything you want to comment on ACEs generally before getting into the meat of what we're talking about today? Jay, you're on mute. I can see you talking.
I think it's so important that we keep on raising awareness, especially that slide there, the ACE and the long-term impacts it's got on the physical health. As what I went through as a child. Now I'm coming out with physical ailments, and they can all be linked back to trauma. So it's really important we keep on pushing that out there. I know we're doing well government-wise, but grassroots-wise, we really need to still keep getting that message sent out there. It's so important. The science behind it is so important, and the ramifications behind it are just, well, they're life or death.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks, Jay. Angela, did you want to come in on that one as well, or you want to move on?
And I think people need to realise as well, people that are clued up, well, do know what ACEs are, that if somebody says they have 10 ACEs, they're like, whoa, you really must be messed up. Where that person might have a fulfilling life. And somebody could say, I've got one ace, and they're like, well, that's not too bad, get on with it. That one ace could be ruining that person's life. It's not a measuring contest.
Yeah.
One could be as bad as 10.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just going to say
Subjective.
on that, Angela, I think one of the founders of Wave had 9 adverse childhood experiences, and she went on to be extremely successful, you know, across work, across different areas of life. And that's not to say she didn't struggle in different ways, but, you know, we were very much founded on an example of that, of what you can do even though you've experienced many ACEs. And we've listed 10 ACEs today, but those aren't the only experiences of trauma that exist out there that have the impact. So someone might have a score of 1 ACE, but actually have lots of other forms of trauma that aren't in those 10 that are counted. Someone might have 10 ACEs, but have experienced nothing else. And as I said, these are things that can be counterbalanced. It takes far more positive experiences, unfortunately, to counteract one absolutely terrible one. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. That doesn't mean you can't build resilience, particularly when people's brains are still developing in the really crucial early years. You can have a huge impact on how they're able to cope with any adversity that happens to them later on. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, Angela, to start out with. It's not a numbers game. What we're looking at is trends rather than an individual level. So it's wonderful to understand how much it increases your risk to things, but it's not a sentence for any individual.
And the thing is as well, once you start to realise that you have ACEs in your life, that's when you can actually say, oh, that's why I done that. Maybe that's why I done that. Because there's so many people out there that, as you say, don't even know what an ACE is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we can start helping these people.
100%. And I think we're really starting to make a dent in that and starting to get the word out there.
Absolutely.
I've seen a huge shift in the last few years. So I'm going to move on and focus on what we really want to be talking about today, and that's parental separation and divorce, because that is one of the most common adverse childhood experiences that people go through. And it's also one that's a lot more normalized within society to talk about, I think, compared to some of the other ones that we've touched on. Particularly, I think we talked about physical abuse and emotional neglect previously. And I think it's much more understood that parental separation happens and that can impact people on a day-to-day basis. So I know that we're going to be touching on quite a few different themes during today's session, but I know that Jay and Angela are going to be touching on both some of experiences as parents who have separated, but also as being children in the house where, you know, they might not have both parents or there has been parental separation. So we're going to have a bit of a mix of a perspective there. And we'll also have a wonderful testimonial to read out later as well. So lots to cover today. I think to start off with, Angela, I'd love to hear from you just a little bit of what you think is the most important message for people today that they should know about parental separation.
Please don't stay together for kids. Please don't stay together for kids. My mum left my dad when I was 22, and her reason for it was she stayed with him until we all grew up. And it was the most horrifying thing I've been through, because my dad then went on to take a mental health breakdown, and because I was older, I had to look after him. So I then the roles in reverse to parent being child and child being parent. And I was 22. I wasn't ready to start looking after my dad at that age. You know, you see that as years and years and years down the line to come, that your parents would need you to look after them when they're older and they can't help themselves. But my mum just got up one day and walked out. Never said, never nothing, just walked out. And I went down to see my dad, and he was scrubbing the floor with boiling hot water, saying that there was a stain on the floor. There was nothing on the floor. And that was when we knew we had to get him to a doctor. And it was a 33-year marriage they had went through. But the marriage was toxic. And to see it, looking back now from a growing up point of view, it was a horrible atmosphere 24/7. They didn't talk to each other, they just lived under the same roof. And we walked on eggshells. Whenever the two of them were in the same room, me and my brother and sister were walking on eggshells all the time. If my dad's football team got beat, his TV was through the wall. If my mum put some music on to do the housework, the high five was through the wall. So it was basically, if they were in the house together, we were basically walking on eggshells. So they should have left each other then, because they caused more harm when we were younger by staying together than they did by my mum leaving when we were older. So I would really, 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 I know it's going to hurt your kids, but in the long run, they will really benefit from it if you do it when they're young. Kids are resilient. Kids will bounce back. But it's a lot harder for an adult to bounce back from something like that.
And I think what you're saying there about when it's hard to bounce back, I think it's a very individual thing, and it also depends how it happens and when it happens.
Yeah.
Obviously, it hits at different developmental stages for different people. I think what makes a difference is when people think they're staying together for kids, that doesn't mean that they're creating a calm and safe sanctuary at home where children can retreat back to. It's often a situation that can be still stressful. So at whatever age it happens to be, because you might, be in a happy marriage for a while and then something happens that can create tension that will eventually lead to separation. The idea is that just staying together for the sake of the kids might not create the stability you think it does. You might still be creating tension within the household in a way that you haven't understood. And I think I had a really interesting conversation with someone else who had experienced kind of divorce at a young age in the home around the different types of ways in which the household can be different than where the separation can happen. So it might be really explicit tension, and that might be, arguments, shouting, having to really witness the conflict on a day-to-day basis, and also somewhat expecting, therefore, that knowing something is wrong. But the opposite end can sometimes be just as problematic, and obviously it truly is a spectrum. But the opposite end of hiding absolutely everything and pretending that everything is fine,
yes.
Going whatever, and suddenly turning around and saying, actually, we're leaving each other, can really pull the rug out from a child's feet. And this might, again, be an age thing. If you're 16, you might be able to still read between the lines and see the tension. But if you're 4 or 5, you might have genuinely believed that everything was okay and lose a lot of that trust in knowing what's going on. So neither situation is ideal. There is a spectrum of everything in between. So a lot of what matters, we said this at the start when we're talking about ACEs, is making sure you're maintaining that wonderful relationship with the kids as much as possible, that you're maintaining moments that are important, you're maintaining that trust, you're keeping that relationship going, you're making sure that you're both still a safe place for the kid in a different way. And that's not at all saying that will be easy, but that does need to be one of the main priorities.
What I found though as well was, because my mum was trying so hard to keep out my dad's road, then we didn't get any bonding time. at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just kind of left to. My mum cooked for us. She done our washings. Motherly things.
Mm-hmm.
But that was where the line stopped.
Yeah.
And so you didn't have that mother-daughter night. You didn't, nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
The road trips, things like that. We never had anything like that because we couldn't guarantee if we went on a road trip that mum and dad wouldn't start arguing. So all that was, I would see all my friends saying, "Oh, we had a great night last night because we went here, or we went to the park, or we went here," and that hurt because my parents weren't adult enough to put that to the side for their kids.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately a really common experience, Angela, when these things happen. So yeah, I think thank you for sharing that. I want to pick up on one last thing from what you said, Angela, before moving on to Jay, who I know has been waiting patiently to share some of his insight as well. But you were talking about having to look after your dad, and obviously you were an adult at the time that this happened, but it can still be common at different moments for kids to become support to the parents in a different way. That might be emotional support. Maybe when they're younger, they're the person they rant to. But very often, when so many difficult things are happening within our household, things stop being quite as age appropriate. You might start to put extra responsibilities on. You might find that you're leaning on them for support in a way that you used to lean on partners, etc., etc. So it can be a really difficult balance. And that's, again, we're going to be talking about lots of things today. I want to clarify that they're not always happening, but they are themes that can often come up within separation. So we're not expecting every single divorce and every single separation to include all of these. We just know that there is a high risk for them and that these are things that can happen and can cause harm. I just want to make that clear from the start because I know that people will have had different experiences. But definitely that kind of extra responsibility on a kid is unfortunately common in different ways.
And I want people to have hope that if they do want to leave their partner, that there is help out there. I'm a big one for having hope. So I want people to take away for this hope that if they walk away, there is people that will help them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to stay there because they've nowhere to go. There is places to go.
Absolutely. And as you said, both for the kids and for the parents themselves, it is better for them to be happy and healthy and safe than it is to be trying to push through a really difficult situation. I think that's true for everyone.
I mean, no matter where they put them, if the father or the mother have the kids, as long as they are safe, that is the main thing.
100%. Jay, I think I'd love to hear from you now. What do you want the biggest takeaway for people to be around separation today?
I think it's going to be, I'm going to touch on what Angela just said there. 22-year-old, and she was an adult. The whole point of raising awareness on ACEs is, sorry, Angela, you weren't an adult at 22 because of your childhood. And I'm going to get onto that and talk personally about that myself because I wasn't an adult either. We never got to grow up. So, it was when we done that with your dad, we shouldn't have been doing it. We didn't know what to do, but we done it. The biggest takeaway I want to take away for today is the attachment and the attachment issues it can cause and the abandonment issues it can cause. I can't talk much from parents separating, as my parent was a bereavement. However, my stepdad and my mum, they did split up once or twice, and it was because of arguing. My dad, I make no secret, he was one of the lads. He was well connected. He was what he was. He was in the game, and he would he was a party animal. He would drink, and when he got in the whiskey or the vodka, was it the whiskey or the vodka? I can't even mind myself. When he got in the whiskey, when he got in the whiskey, it was just, he turned into Tonto sometimes. And I remember as a kid watching him smash through the bathroom toilet wall with his bare fists, basically tore it all apart. I can remember being scared then because it took me back to when I was a kid. Above all, but I was terrified I was going to get abandoned by another dad again, though. The couple of times my mum and dad did split up, they managed to work it out and get back together. And this is probably where I've took a lesson for, is that me and Angela split. And this is where I'll get personal, and this is where I get to where I wasn't growing up. Me and Angela split up. And a lot of folk are going to think I'm a bad guy here, but please don't. Me and Angela split because I hadn't sought help yet. And I was trying to prove I was a man in every way possible. You know, doing things I shouldn't have been doing, criminal activity, but also, you know, things I shouldn't have been doing to my wife, cheating on her, which is a form of abuse. And I decided that, you know what, 9 months prior to me walking into the petrol station, I decided, you know what, I can't live like this. I'm away to go and be a party animal. And I moved out. I lived in the hostel, and looking back, I wasn't there for my kids. I wasn't there for them. There's one time in particular, I was meant to take Kieran away for his football, and I was lying at a party somewhere and couldn't do it. Me and Angela were amicable enough, but I just, at that point, I wasn't interested, and I'm ashamed to say it now. I wasn't interested in getting back together. I wasn't interested in spending time with my kids. I wasn't interested in, well, it was just Kieran, really, me and Rose at the time. I wasn't interested in spending time with them. I wasn't interested in anything other than numbing my head. And again, that goes back to ACEs. Again, there's a wee bit of shame there about that, but I've seen it now in the generational cycle. I've seen Kieran create attachment issues. When he was only 14, he got his first girlfriend that was serious, and then he got another one and had 2 kids, and it was serious. And looking back now, I realise he did, if he couldn't have his mum and dad, he was attaching himself to any girl he could, or any girls that came along. He was keeping hold of them and keeping attached to them. And I believe that was fear of abandonment, but again, you need to ask Kieran that himself, and he's coming on to talk about it as well anyway, as you know. So, but that, to me, you know, that makes me feel really bad. That makes me feel absolutely terrible that he grew up terrified of attachment, just as I was. And if I knew what I knew now, I would never have done that back then. But now, thankfully, Kieran's broke the cycle. He realises that he was in toxic relationships, and he realises now that he's got a good one in Tasha, and they balance it. So they've both got a bit of independence, which I believe, to be successful in a marriage or a relationship, you've got to keep a bit of independence each as well, and have your own marriage as well. But no, the damage that done, the damage you just seeing your parents split, it's hard, because you don't know who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. At that time, these are the kind of questions that are going through your head. Again, why have they split up? Who's done what? Why have they done that? What's it for? You know. So it's the attachment and abandonment issues that causes children, which I really want to highlight on. Sorry if that went on more longer than what you expected me there, Isabel, but I hope I've covered it well.
Not at all. I think you covered a lot of really important things there, Jay. And I first of all wanted to thank you for sharing that, because it's obviously different to talk about, you know, your experiences as a kid as it is within your own relationships, and especially with both you and Angela on today. So thank you for both being happy to share that and have a conversation around it, because I think it's really valuable to see both sides of that kind of element. There's quite a few different things I wanted to pick up on there, Jay, because I think you've touched on a lot of really important themes. I think the first one, you were talking about working out the good versus bad guy. I think a really common thing, unfortunately, in this divorce is one parent talking badly about another in a way that can really impact the child's relationship with that parent. And now I know that there's many single parents out there who don't have anyone else that they're raising a kid with for whatever reason. But a child fully needs the people who it had in its life to start with, that it's used to. They're key kind of figures. And a kind of shift within that can be really hard and really impact the child in different ways. And I think that one big issue can be that sometimes there's a tendency to talk about what a parent has done wrong, talk about, that, but also sometimes to make comparisons. When you act like that, you remind me of your dad, you do whatever, that all of those sayings can also really link to the fact that a child starts their identity around their parents, and you're tying them to someone you're painting as a bad person. So even though a lot of the time there can be divorces and separations in really difficult situations where people have hurt others, it is really important to understand what it means putting the child in the middle of all of that. That kind of links into what you were saying about attachment, Jay, as well. I think, you're really modeling the first key relationship that children will have the best understanding of. You're really setting that first template that they'll see. And it can have big impacts later on when they start to form their own relationships in different ways, both through attachment styles, but also through expectations. Angela, I know that you spoke about this with me when we were preparing for today's live stream, how seeing your parents' relationship kind of set up expectations for you afterwards. Do you want to touch on that briefly before we get to the testimonial?
What I'm glad of as well is we're very open with our children. And our children they've started asking questions about my dad and why I don't talk to him. So my oldest daughter, who's turned 14, we actually had to sit her down and explain to her why. So it was hard, really hard. But there was something you said there, and it was, you sound like your dad there. When people say that to me now, you can imagine, and I'm going to say it far and wide. I was told 4 years ago, I got a chap at the door to tell me that my dad had been arrested and been charged and was put on the paedophile register. And my dad had always been my hero. Even after everything between him and my mum, I was really close to my dad. But now I don't talk to him at all, because that was when I was going through my 5-year court case. So when people say things like that to me now, oh, you sound like your dad, or you look like your dad, that's a major trigger for me. So some people might want to be a bit mindful when they say that to people who know that their parents are split up, because they don't know if they get to see their mum, they don't know if they get to see their dad. So it could be pretty hard for the child or even the teenager to take in if they've not got a relationship with the other parent.
Absolutely, Angela, thank you. I'm realizing that I'm running out of natural light, so I might rush to stick a light on there before I read out the testimonial. Jay, is there anything you wanted to comment on there just whilst I'm sorting out the lighting?
Again, it's just, it all goes back to the attachment theory and why the 70-30 campaign and Wave Trust are doing what they are, and where the science aces have come from. I mean, the attachment theory has been on the go since 1950 when John Bowlby came out with it, and that's what we're fundamentally trying to do, is create secure attachments among children, which are healthier attachments, and make them less likely to be affected by divorce and separation, or neglect, or any of the ACEs really. For me, again, it just all comes back down to attachment theory and abandonment, and the damage that can cause. There was another time that me and Angela split up as well. We've been together 28 years, by the way. So the other time we split was also before we got help, and I made a big mistake there as well. We lost Angela again. I'm sure she'll be back. We lost I learned a valuable lesson there, because when we split, Angela moved into her mum's, and she only had one spare bedroom, so she could only take one of the kids. So we separated the children, and that was a really, 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 really bad thing to do. And again, knowing what I know now, I would never have done that. Like I said, I hope I'm a bad guy. But we split the children up, and again, me and Angela were amicable all the way through it, so the children never saw any arguing. However, I can notice in my children as well, like the child that was separated for the siblings, she's created a whole independent persona for herself, and she withdraws into herself and isolates, and she's not very social, and that's on me. That's on me, and we've been working on it ever since I got help. We've been working on that.
Oh, that's on us.
Well, on us, so I just wanted to touch on that as well, that there was twice we separated, and twice it affected the kids in different ways. Never separate the kids if you have to. Never ever separate siblings unless it's the last resort.
Absolutely, and there's a lot to be said of co-parenting in different ways once you have split that can be a real challenge. And there are many ways that are definitely better than keeping them in a really unhappy home, but that's, we do not want to minimize all of the challenges that can come with that, both in terms of splitting time or when it might not be amicable, but even when it is, they're just things that can get in the way. Even just simply, you might have partners who don't want to live nearby anymore. They've met other people, they want to be somewhere else, etc. There's all kinds of logistics that can come in.
What my problem was I had to move back in with my mum, and she only had the 2-bedroom house. Now, I had 4 young children at the time, and there was no possible way I could have the 4 young children stay in a 1-bedroom with me all at the one time. So we were having to do like keeping 2 at a time, 3 at a time, and doing it that way. So I never ever got to have my 4 children at once, which was so hard. But it was for the best, and the best for the kids as well. And that was all that mattered.
That was after the initial. I was speaking about how we separated. One of them went away with you, and I had 3 at first, and so we sorted that out.
Wonderful. I am going to move things on a little bit more abruptly than I want to, just because I want to make sure we leave time to look through the testimony here. And I think it'll be important to get another voice on and leave a little bit time for a final comment, as I know that Jay, you've got to run off at the end of today's call as well. You're getting some wonderfully supportive messages in the comments as well. I haven't been reading them out as we've had lots to talk about, but there is a lot of support coming your way. So I'm just going to put this up on the screen here. Claire has been happy to share her name with this, but wasn't up to coming on live today, and has shared a little bit of her own story around parental separation. So I'm just going to read that out as we go. As a child, watching my mum and stepdad divorce and the impact that had on us as children was a really painful one to bear. Access was fought over, we weren't able to see both parents, and the emotional turmoil that it brought us as children still affects me to this day. It taught me as an adult that no matter who you're with or how much you love that person, eventually they'll leave. But it was even more impactful when I had my own children and the same thing came around to them. When I had my first children, I was in an abusive relationship and I left for the safety of my family. My children went on to see their father on and off over the years, but the toxic behavior passed on to them as they picked up and questioned over what I was doing and where they had been, and time was never really spent emotionally for them. That was a strain on all of the relationships, and we couldn't talk about the other to the children, which caused a split and no support for the family as a whole. When I had my second son and his father left and never returned, the pain I had to watch him go through still goes on to this day. But it is only now that I really realize how this impacted all of my children. I find my son wondering why he wasn't enough. Why did Daddy leave? Why didn't he love me enough? Did I do something wrong? And it makes me have to reevaluate how I also felt as a child. When you're small, you don't realize the implications of a failed relationship, and you sit and ponder over the fact that you were the reason for a family breakdown. You feel as if love wasn't enough and that you were at fault for the breakdown of your parents. As you grow, these feelings impact any relationship you go on to have, and you hold on to the fact that one day this person you love will work away. So you're scared to love as you should do. I've been single for 3 years, and I can't honestly see me in a relationship again. The fear of hurt and rejection from all failed relationships, including the relationships of my parents, has been damaging. The pain of watching my children's heart breaking over a 25-year period has been devastating. And the saddest part is that all I ever wanted was a family. Something which not only I never had, but one I couldn't even provide for my children. Parental separation and divorce was a major ace for me, and the impact of that ace went on to last a lifetime. Sadly, this happens to so many, and in order to break those cycles, we must acknowledge, be accountable, and speak out. So, I think we've lost Angela in the stream there. So, wanted to share that one as it's a really, really impactful story. Thank you so, so much, Claire, for sharing as well and sending you all our best. But I think that can really show how it impacts you, particularly when you're young. I think as you get older, you start to understand more of the nuances. You start to understand that your parents had their own reasons for splitting up. But when you're really little, it can be so easy to internalize, to think it has something to do with you. And I think it was also a really, really good example of how it can impact your own future relationships. So very much thank you for sharing that. I'm seeing some great support from a few people in the chat there as well. So yeah, I don't know if any of you two have some comments to follow on from that.
Yeah, very brave, Claire. Very brave. You know, you've just summed up everything we've been talking about there. And listen, you will have a family one day. Keep the hope. We're all here for you.
Your family will be reunited. Absolutely.
Definitely. And you can create many families that don't look, you know, the traditional way. You can create a family around you and support around you in many, many different ways. So you have many ways to thrive until or if that happens for you, Claire. And we're wishing you all the best in the meantime.
She's got her sister here.
Absolutely. I'm just having a quick glance over what we've been talking about today, because I think there's a few themes that's probably worth just bringing up as different things. One that I think we haven't particularly touched on and is important to acknowledge is that parents having new relationships can also be a really difficult time within families. If it's a series of complicated relationships, you know, if the separation or divorce happened because of kind of intergenerational cycles, for example, it might be that there's a series of failed relationships rather than just one, and that might impact the children further. With new relationships, you might also have to move where you're staying, move house, create new relationships, work out whether they're going to have a parental role in your life or not. And they can also bring in step siblings, you know, new families, new relationships in different ways. So there is a lot that can go on there, and it can be a really, really positive thing. You know, you can create some wonderful bonds with new parents in new ways, get new support systems, and it can be really difficult. And there is a whole spectrum of experiences there that can create, you know, great opportunities and great difficulties in different ways. But I think it is really worth acknowledging that that is a big part of parental separation and some of the difficulties that come around that. Another thing, oh, Angela, go ahead.
I found that really hard because when my mum walked out, she told us she had nowhere to go. And she headed to a small village called Redditch. Now, she never knew anyone from there, as far as we knew. But she had been on the internet talking to people. And 6 months later, she came back up to Scotland with this man that she had just met. But, I mean, that was what happens with us not being younger. We knew that she had left my dad to go and meet this man, which left a lot of hurt, anger, resentment, because I was the one that got left to look after my dad. And then she brings this new man into her life, expecting us all to like him and get on with him. And then we got married, but I couldn't even go to the wedding because I was so hurt. I mean, we're now, 32 years down, 22 years down, 28 years down the line. And I have accepted them.
Martin's a great guy.
He is a nice guy, but at first, it absolutely cut me to the bone. It was as though she's walked out on my dad for this other man. Why not just say that to us instead of telling us that my dad had raped her and beat her up, and this was all the things that she spat at us when we said, "Why did you walk out on us?" Because she actually turned on us as quick as she turned on my dad. But I think it was that was kind of a block for her. If she didn't let us in, then she wasn't going to let my dad back in. But she went from being a cuddly mum to a complete block. And she came back up expecting everything to go back to the I'm your cuddly mum, and I couldn't forgive that, Isabel. I really couldn't forgive that.
I think that's really understandable, Angela. And I think you've touched on something else that's important for me, which is the capacity to be emotionally available is obviously really, really impacted in stressful situations. And there can be many things that lead into this. This is why we know that, situations in which domestic abuse is happening, in which there's complicated situations in the household, it can be that much harder to be emotionally available parents. And separation can often be one of them. It takes a lot of effort and it takes energy to be emotionally present, to have that great moments of interaction, of attunement and everything else, to be that cuddly mum, to have those moments. And I think that can be an example. And obviously, again, you had that kind of sudden switch when you were legally an adult, but perhaps through all of the experiences that you hadn't yet grown up fully in different ways, and so it still very much impacted you. But that can happen at so many different ages. If you have a sudden switch, that can be a huge loss of a core relationship that you're building up your world around. So that's a really important one to touch on. I think the final one that I wanted to acknowledge is that the legal process can often sometimes be a complication for people. Obviously, there can be parental separation without kind of any legality involved, but for a lot of times marriages can have that kind of extra complication of it not being something that can be settled amicably, of there being conversations around payments, about finances, about splitting things up, about how you're going to organize custody of the kids, back and forth, time spent, sometimes kids really being used within that structure to get something, to get revenge from partners, to achieve something within that. They can be put really in the middle in some really messy situations, unfortunately. So I think it's also worth acknowledging that is a process that needs to be trauma informed, with all of the services that are coming to support divorcing parents, to understand not only how they can support the people who are divorcing, but also how they can support the wider family and the children involved, because it is a truly difficult moment in which many, many triggers can come up, in which many new traumas can be experienced. So I think we've probably got another 5-10 minutes in what we're doing. So I think I'd love to hear one more thing from both of you today before we let Jay run off to his next engagement. So Angela, I might let you go first. What do you think would be, what can we do as a society to support families that are dealing with parental separation? What can we be doing differently?
Help them get out of, if they need to be out of the relationship they're in, get them out of it. Because it's just, as the years go on, it just gets harder and harder and harder.
Yeah. And
the kids get older and older and older, and it gets harder for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but never give up hope. Like I says, there is always somewhere to go if you need to get out of a relationship that you're not happy in, or for whatever reason. It could just be that you don't love the person anymore. It could be that they're violent, that they're playing games with your mind. It doesn't matter. Just, you have to make that move and just leave. Don't wait till the kids are older. It just does more damage.
Yeah. Thanks, Angela. Jay, what about you? What do you think we can do differently as a society to support families in that way?
Yeah, I think just touching on what Angela was saying, I think more trauma-informed support services for parents who are going through divorce and separation, wider awareness, putting the kids first before the relationship. That's a big thing for me, and now it is anyway. Is putting the kids first in the relationship, and as Angela alluded to, don't stay together just for the kids, because you just keep yourselves unhappy, and the kids, they end up with attachment issues because of it. So yeah, it's spreading this awareness and how important that people think that ACEs is the big three, and it's not always the case. Parental divorce and parental separation, and the way you're modelled growing up. Don't underestimate that and how it's had an impact on your life, or how it has an impact on your kids' lives. Because it really is important. At the very core is everything we're doing here, and that's attachment. Attunement.
I think I wanted to pick up on what you said there, Jay, about putting the kids first. I think we want to make it really, really clear that there is a difference between putting kids first in the sense of understanding child development and understanding how parental separation impacts them, and putting their well-being first. So making sure that you're prioritizing time to bond with them, making sure that you're allowing the relationship to form with their other partner, making sure that you're providing security wherever you can, making sure that you're asking for help, versus putting the kids first in the sense of not being honest about the current situation, about the difficulties, and just trying to push through in a difficult relationship because of them.
Yeah,
so I think that's the separation we're saying there. And the final thing I want to say on the trauma-informed services, I mean, there's the obvious services that come into direct contact when there is a parental separation happening, but we can do a lot in a trauma-informed way. Schools, for example, can know that is going on and can understand, actually, this is a really difficult and complex situation. Now is the time to really up the support that we're giving this child, and maybe focus on that kind of relationship again. We know that teachers can have a huge impact. It might be trauma-informed support, even from the start, in things like parenting classes and setting relationships up better. Relationship training when we're in schools could be a start for, I think, a lot of problems that can come up further down the line as well, especially for people who haven't had previously good models of relationships in different ways. So there are many, many different things that we can be doing. That is my alarm, Jay, as well, to remind us to wrap things up. But yeah, I think we as a society can be doing a lot more, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, because it isn't all just on the parents who are separating. They're not in isolation. Consequences on kids, consequences on them aren't just a blame game. You know, there is a lot that we can be doing to make this less impactful and less damaging, and I think we should all be working towards that being the case. And again, these things aren't happening in isolation. There might be some people who've only ever experienced parental separation as their main adversity, but there can be all kinds of difficult dynamics within the home, as you've both experienced, Jane and Angela, of many other ACEs also happening. Perhaps ones that aren't counted, it might be bereavement, it might be bullying in school as well, many other elements. So whilst we are focusing on one specifically today, it's all happening in a complex, bigger picture, and those do influence how it affects people. You can get support, for example, from grandparents, teachers, siblings can make a big difference. Are you an only child when that's happening? Or, you know, are you the only child left in the household, even though you have, you know, siblings who've left or whatever else? There's many different complex factors that come in. So yeah, I think to everyone who has experienced this or is experiencing it, you can reach out for support. There's plenty of hope, as Angela has been wonderfully highlighting throughout the day. And I just wanted to wrap up with a couple of final reminders. First of all, if you have any lived experience of adverse childhood experiences and would like to get involved, please contact Hearts of ACE and see what you can do, both in terms of peer support group and in terms of advocacy. You can drop an email to heartsoface@wavetrust.org, and you'll get some wonderful support there and see what suits you best and have a few brilliant conversations. And I'll also say that if you want any more information on the 70/30 campaign, what we're doing as a charity on adverse childhood experiences, you can go to our website, www.wavetrust.org. And if you're particularly focused on the 70/30 campaign, it's www.wavetrust.org/7030. But yeah, hopefully you'll check us out and we'll be able to continue on this series, as we'll be looking at more ACEs as we go ahead. And I also am looking forward to being joined by Jay, Angela, and their son Kieran as well at some point to talk about intergenerational trauma in a bit more detail. So keep your eyes out for that too. Is there any final message you guys want to close things on?
Yeah, I think sorry, I'll let ladies go first. Go, Angela.
Keep up hope. Always. There's always somebody there for you.
Yeah, and I believe that too. And also, you know, a lot of us in this generation, we grew up and our parents grew up in a different generation. They didn't have the tools, they didn't have the skills. The smacking ban was in. I'll keep going over it. There's no shame in putting your hand up and saying, you know what, I wasn't equipped with the tools, but you know what, I am now, so I can make the wee changes. It doesn't make you a bad person. It really doesn't. It makes you a better person for looking at it and making those changes. And don't be afraid to speak out, because that's the only way we'll beat the stigma.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more, Jay. And I think you're a wonderful example of that. You know, all the things that you can change once you have the knowledge, once you have the support, are incredible. So don't be afraid to look at past experiences that might have had negative consequences that you didn't want. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been wonderful to be able to start up these live streams again. I'm looking forward to coming back soon. But I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you,
everybody.